Ready?
Yeah. Hello everyone, welcome to our presentation about countering video game addiction in Japan.
So as far-fetched as it might sound, video game addiction is a serious issue that affects people worldwide. With the growth and advances of modern-day technology and subsequent rise of more advanced video games, developing addiction is easier than ever. The term gaming disorder is actually present in the World Health Organization's draft of its international classification of diseases, and is defined as a pattern of persistent or recurring gaming behavior so severe that it takes precedence over other life interests. In fact, Douglas Gentile, a psychologist that has studied the subject for decades, estimates that around 10% of gamers per region could be classified as addictive. This is no light matter, as Bill David Dow, a Stanford PhD graduate and an author of many titles on tech addiction, describes the process of video game addiction to be very similar to drug or gambling addictions, which occurs through the release of dopamine into the brain's pleasure sensors. Game companies know this and will actively take advantage of this in order to keep their players hooked. In extreme cases, gamers have died or have neglected their loved ones in favor of playing. CNN reported in 2010 that a South Korean couple had neglected and eventually starved their child in favor of caring for their virtual child in a video game. And in 2015, BBC reported that another case in South Korea where a man had died after playing games for 50 hours straight. As a major industry for technology and gaming, Japan is especially vulnerable to cases of video game addiction. Japan's government estimates that around 500,000 teens are already addicted to their screens, and such a severe addiction can lead to a rise in hikikomori, which are reclusive Japanese adolescents or adults that have withdrawn completely from society and seek extreme isolation or confinement. According to a survey released by the Japanese government, in 2016 it was estimated that over 500,000 Japanese youths have already shut themselves away, and an increase in video game addiction will only lead to an increase in that number.
Our question is, what are the most effective strategies to counteract video game addiction in Japan?
Although video game addiction is a growing problem, there are effective strategies to combating it. The strategies are categorized into two sections, rehabilitation and limiting access. To clarify, rehabilitation incorporates CBT or cognitive behavioral therapy, video game addiction boot camps, and rehabilitation centers, which are both forms of rehabilitation. Then limiting access is just simply access over internet servers. The first rehabilitation strategy is cognitive behavioral therapy. According to NHS.com, CBT is based on the concept that your feelings, thoughts, and physical sensations are interconnected, and negative thoughts and feelings can trap you in a vicious cycle. The main goal is to break down negative feelings into smaller bits and deal with them in a more positive way. Sessions with therapists and patients usually last around 30 to 60 minutes. Even though it's mainly used to cure people with depression, it has the same effect with people struggling with addiction, or in our case, video game addiction. Although it sounds very complicated, it is proven effective in aiding people with video game addiction. According to James Kernan, who is an author of various self-help books and an associate to British Psychological Society, CBT has a fairly impressive success rate of around 50%, although estimates do vary somewhat. To add on, what's also important about CBT is that it's safe compared to medication, which is another strategy used to combat video game addiction. Again, according to James Curran, CBT is natural and safe, unlike most medications that come with the potential side effects. There's nothing in the CBT process that can cause harm. The key to successful CBT is to help clients to feel safe enough to gradually change their beliefs and behaviors. With this strategy comes various limitations. These limitations can depend on the patient. For example, if the patient is unmotivated or extremely in denial, they have potential to shut out their therapist, which ultimately defeats the purpose of cognitive behavioral therapy.
A potential solution is the addition of a rehabilitation clinic. In the vicinity, Kim Sang-ho, a former addict, discovered his dream of wanting to become a doctor. This revelation was made a month after his admittance. While in care, he was restricted from all electronic devices. Instead, he was prescribed reading, music, and therapy to reconnect him with the offline world. However, there is a stigma around treating mental illness, commonly known in Japan as saving face. This could deter ill citizens from seeking help. However, despite this stigma, Kim's story is one of many recovering addicts that have been provided with the care as mental health patients. Through this treatment, rehabilitated citizens enhance their lives by finding passions beyond the scoreboard.
Video game addiction is often compared to other addictions like alcohol and drug addiction. The forms of treatment for video game addiction are very similar. In rehabilitation camp retreats, gamers that are often in their teenage years are sent to rehabilitation centers and they are housed with other video game addicted teens. They do not have access to technology whatsoever for 10 to 30 days, depending on the severity of their addiction. They participate in daily support group style discussions, they have one-on-one time with a therapist every day, and they participate daily in active outdoor activities. According to an article by Mother Jones magazine, in 2015 there were almost 300 rehabilitation boot camps popping up around China. It's becoming a trending strategy to combat video game addiction. For an example of this strategy proving effectiveness, in China there is a video game addiction camp run by Tao Ran, a former military member. In his camp, he uses military practices to help the addicted break their addiction. Tao Ran has an impressive 70% success rate. Compared to other strategies like cognitive behavioral therapy, rehabilitation boot camps take on video game addiction with a more social approach.
This is why we're seeing internet gaming disorder become a bigger problem, because now, says Gentile, you can access games pretty much everywhere. Though games are available on mobile devices, the overpopulation of internet cafes also promotes excessive screen time by making web access more convenient and necessary, therefore normalizing the convenience and abundance of such devices. Citizens' distorted perspectives on healthy screen hours is not solely due to internet cafes, but they are still contributed to such distortions. In fact, similar to previously mentioned extreme cases, CNN reported a man that died after a 3-day gaming binge in an internet cafe. There are some methods that Japan's government could put into action to limit internet cafes, such as establishing stricter guidelines for minors' usage, possibly by preventing students' entrance without legitimate reasoning during school hours. Or continue to repurpose cafes into hotels or shelters, an option that has already influenced 5,400 citizens of Japan. According to a recent government survey, these net cafe refugees spend at least half their week living in cafes such as Manga Square. Therefore, this option not only contributes to the addiction, but also assists in those unlucky in Japan's society.
Another solution, which has already been implemented in South Korea and China, is called the shutdown law, or nicknamed the Cinderella law. What this does is that it blocks minors from accessing online game servers after midnight. This can be especially helpful for curbing addiction to online games, which can be especially addictive as they revolve around a community and cannot be paused. Preventing younger players from accessing the game during late hours can ensure that they maintain a healthy balance between gaming while focusing on other responsibilities. To address the limitations of these methods, and they can include backlash from players who feel that their freedom has been restricted and a potential loss of business for cafe owners, players should be reminded that these limitations are set for their own well-being to ensure that they can stay healthy and they can keep enjoying their games. And cafes can restore that lost business by repurposing as shelters, as previously mentioned.
In Japanese culture, there's a stigma with sharing your problems with others. Support group style therapy is extremely untraditional and somewhat looked down upon. A strategy like rehabilitation boot camps would be a very unorthodox way to deal with video game addiction in Japan. An effective solution in Japan would be to implement cognitive behavioral therapy options for video game addiction. This would be effective because it is the most independent approach you can use for countering video game addiction. Another effective strategy would be for the government to conduct a strategy much like the Cinderella Act. Japanese citizens under the age of 18 would have their legitimate identification information linked to their video game profiles. At a specific curfew, the government would block access to underage gamers from their servers. This strategy would limit access to video games and combined with cognitive behavioral therapy rates of video game addiction should decrease in Japan. Thank you.
It's very
10 seconds left. Oh. Okay. All right. All right, Madeleine, can you talk a little bit about how the content of your team argument was influenced or changed based on group discussion?
So we initially, our common topic that put us in the same group was technology, so we wanted to explore a topic in that field, and we eventually came up with the idea of looking at video game addiction. The one thing that changed the most for our topic was definitely the scope. Initially, we wanted to look at video game addiction in South Korea because it's a much more widespread issue there. But since most of our strategies actually came from South Korea, we felt like the issue had already been resolved, and we wanted to see how we could apply those same strategies into different locations. And that's why we ended up picking Japan. And I guess that's how our question ended up changing. And there were some more moments where we thought about changing the scope, but we ended up sticking with Japan.
Okay, great. Luke, can you talk about something that influenced your thinking from one of the other 3 reports?
I would say in Madeleine's essay, she talked about how the story of how a South Korean couple and they were both like video game addicted, and they had just had like an infant child, and in their video game they like took care of like a simulated like child, like a make-believe baby, and then basically they got too preoccupied with that, and their actual baby died. And I think at first I really didn't think about video game addiction as like a serious issue, but when I like saw that article, and I mean it's like kind of to the extreme, but it really made me think about how it can be like a real issue.
Okay, great. Joseph, can you think about the group process and perhaps something, I don't want to like diss anybody. Is there something that you guys set group norms before the team project? You know, after this experience, is there something like another norm or something that you would change with your next group if you were to do it again?
So we've already done 2 of these, and our first one, our communication was good, but we never really practiced. But with this group, we set up times to meet after school to practice, and then on our Google Doc, we're always making annotations to our script to like support one another. So I feel like this group right now was a huge improvement to the last one because we're just like helping each other out all the time on the Google Doc, and after school we're practicing, and I feel it's a more interconnected group. For the next presentation I do would probably have to be just like sticking on like deadlines, because sometimes people will forget about adding like works cited or something like this or like that. So I guess just sticking to deadlines, but overall this was a really good group.
Good. You guys are all relieved. Right? Okay, so last question. Alex, can you identify in the team argument, right? Can you identify a gap perhaps that you guys would have liked to have been able to fill if you had more time?
I think a gap that we did have some statistics specifically on Japan's issue, but again, a lot of our statistics about video game addiction came from South Korea, and so I feel like we could have done a better job proving that Japan also had a video game addiction issue. And so that's why I felt we were a little flawed, but we had at least some.
Yeah, good. All right. Good job. That's it.